Let's talk some miracles this morning. I'm joined by author Tony Coscia from Lebanon, who has a book called Tony's 50,000 Co-Incidence Miracles. Tony, good morning. Thank you for coming in today. And for starters, a little background of what got you to this point in your life.
All right. Thank you. Good morning. I guess in case your listeners have to leave us and can't stay for the whole session, we should tell them they can Google the title. If they Google the title, they get a wealth of information. And the title is Tony's 50,000 Co-Incidence Miracles. I'm 75 years old. I was married for 53 years. Married my high school sweetheart, Julie. Unfortunately, she has passed on into eternity now, but one of the miracles explained in the book very thoroughly is the several miracles surrounding her passing, which convinced me and my 3 children we have no doubt she's gone to heaven, but you can't claim that without a lot of better evidence than what we have. But certainly her passing was surrounded by wonderful miracles, and it's all written up in the book. I have 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. I spent 35 years working in accounting primarily. I became an accounting controller in some great companies, vice president of finance in later years. A controller function in a company helps you to run the business by watching the numbers and auditing the numbers, so a controller is well suited to become a president. So I did move into becoming a president in 4 other companies. Currently, I'm a president owner of a consulting coaching business that helps business people solve problems and become more successful. As you'll hear and you'll see in the book, I receive many miracles trying to help companies succeed. I worked for some companies, great companies, systems and methods like Timex watches, Johnson & Johnson, Clear All Hair Coloring, Remington Electric Shavers. Great companies, great people, and I learned a lot there. I thought I might now drift into talk about something about the book. Okay? So again, one more time, if they Google Tony's 50,000 Co-Incidence Miracles, they'll get a lot of information there. Well, after 50 years of trying to be a friend of God, and I know there are many books out there that tell you how to do that, at about age 24, I decided I needed to figure out was there really a God or not. It was important to me to know that, depending, to help me guide what kind of a life I was going to live. So I took some courses, college courses at night, studied the history of religions, spent a few years doing some research, and personally decided, in fact, indeed, there really was a God, and then studied which religion I wanted to belong to. And I think people should do that, decide that for themselves. If you become a friend of God first, He helps you with all of these other things. So my book is about that. It's about first, become a friend of God. That's the key ingredient. Just a side step here is that, Adam and Eve did not have any religion. They were friends of God. Noah had no religion. He was a friend of God. Abraham had no religion. He was a friend of God. We get into starting religion with Moses. So it's important to have a religion for many, many reasons, but I'm not going to preach that again. Once you become God's friend, like Noah and Abraham and Moses, God will guide you into which kind of religion is appropriate for you. But it is important to have a religion, I think, in my life. So after 50 years, God finally convinced me. He tried several times, but most authors will tell you you never feel worthy. Something has to push you over the edge to make you become an author, especially if you're going to write about your life story. It becomes very revealing and very risky what the feedback might be. So I didn't jump into this, and as I say, it took me 50 years to learn what I learned and got to be a better friend of God over the years. Failed a lot of times, as all of us will. But if you start out by saying, God, I want you to help me become your friend, He almost instantaneously does that, because I've learned He made us to be His friends. So He's waiting for us to ask, and with His powers, He can do it with the hardest of us. So I kept fighting it off, but eventually after 50 years, first he in Scripture there's a place where it says, you've duped me, God, you've duped me, you fooled me, and now I found out that you duped me. So He got me started by inspiring me to, why don't you just write a diary and leave it behind for your children and your grandchildren? So that's how I began. I said, okay, that's a good, I'm going to have 3 miracles a day on average. It comes out to 50,000 miracles after 50 years. So I have a lot to put in a diary. I'll leave it for my descendants. Well, after I got the diary going, he started to show me that there were other people out there beside my immediate family who might be able to benefit from this condensation. See, this book is a condensation of 50 years of trying to be God's friend, made a lot of mistakes, had to start over many times, learned what I was using as strengths to guide me, didn't work, had to find some other strengths, had to talk to wiser people than I had as counselors in the beginning. And after 50 years, I have a condensation that I was inspired by God to put it together because it gives everybody a jump start. And that's what religion does, by the way. Religion gathers for generations what people learn about God, and they document it. And so 1,000 years later, people can start to learn about God really quickly instead of starting from scratch like everybody would have to do. So one of the key benefits of religion is you don't have to start from scratch. You can become a pretty decent friend of God by having a religion. So he convinced me to do this. And then I found as I was doing the book, writing the book, and if you read the book, you'll see that this happens 13 times. God miraculously broke in on me while I was writing the book and convinced me by what happened that he was writing the book. I was just typing it. And so I grew in wisdom while I was writing this book because I was reviewing my whole year, my whole life in a year's time. And I started to see a lot of things in my life that I didn't appreciate in the 50 years. And I see he did. He gave me all these miracles with a purpose to write a book eventually. And I didn't see that until the 50 years were over because it's a condensation. And then while I was doing it with a lot of doubts about should I be doing this, he broke in 13 times in the 14 months it took me to write it and convinced me that he was, and I'll tell you one instance now. There was several times where he'd say, change that word. And I should back up again. I'm saying things like he said, he told me. So let me get that out of the way. Some of your listeners may be wondering if I'm schizophrenic. But if you study the history of religion, you'll find that in the Bible alone, and I didn't do the study, but a reputable person did. In the Bible alone, there are 20,000 discussions going on. God's talking 20,000 times to people, and they're talking to him. So the Bible is a clue that people can talk to God. So don't be too surprised about that. Now, some of the major religions have catechisms that tell you, yes, you can talk to God. So when I say he told me or he said, it's coming off of the words. We have 2 words in our vocabulary. One word is inspiration. Everybody uses that. I hear it all the time. I just had a great inspiration. But if you look at the word, it's 2 words. It's in and spiration. And so inspiration is supposed to mean that the Spirit of God got into you and gave you some wisdom. The other word we have is idea. That's 2 words also. It's I and Deo. Deo is the Latin word for God. So when you have a great idea, you have another inspiration of God. So inspiration and idea both say that God is talking to you. So when you say you have a good idea, you're saying God talked to you also. So anyway, if you do the research, and most major religions, they'll tell you, yes, your ministers will tell you, ask God what to do. God will help you. So we've been doing this for thousands of years. And so when I say he told me, I mean I had an inspiration.
Tony, you talked about God speaking to you. Does that come to you in the form of an idea, or in what form does that communication take place? Okay,
very good point. Because he's our best friend, and he loves us more than we can love ourselves, because that's a fact, my book proves that. He loves us, and he's our friend because of that. He does send us inspiration and ideas while we're in the midst of doing things. We call them nudges or promptings or insights or premonitions, or we do get little tinges of that. And the other thing that will always work is if you ask him a question. If you could just picture that somebody loves you more than you can love yourself and they're following you around all day, just picture that for a moment. They love you intensely. They're following you around, and you say, can you help me? What would that loving person do? Ignore you? Say, don't bother me? So that's what we're dealing with. God is intense about loving. He made every molecule in our body, made the color of our eyes, and he has the hairs on our head counted. He's intense about it. And by the way, each of us has a full presence of God. I don't have God's finger, and you have God's toe, and somebody else has God's ear. We all have a total presence of God that's with us constantly. And there's many books on this topic. My book covers it as well, proving that to us, that God is always with each one of us. It's staggering to think 7 billion people on the planet, 7 billion people, and he's totally present fully with each person because he wanted to do that. In the beginning of the Bible, he says, let us make man to our image, and then he breathes his spirit into man. So his spirit is present in every one of us. So it's a very good question. So he will nudge you and prompt you, and you need to respond to that. You need to talk to him about it. Because you get a lot of thoughts. You may get it from the other guy, the guy that has the horns. He may give you inspirations too. So you need to know, and my book covers that as well. How do you spot when the devil is trying to trick you, like the Son of Sam stories in New York City? He said that God told him to kill people. So you can get, inspirations from the other guy. So we need to know how to filter that out, and most ministers and religions will caution people to do that. So my book does cover that too, okay, how to be careful. As I said, my book's a condensation of 50 years. Now, a couple of things that the book proves, a few of them. First, the book will absolutely prove that God exists, and you have to trust me, but after you read it, I get feedback constantly. It proves that God exists. So if you're an atheist, agnostic, the book will help you see, no doubt about it, God exists. Next, it proves that God loves us. And, 50,000 miracles should prove he loved me. He creates the miracles, I don't. So it's not a credit to me that I have 50,000 miracles. It's a credit to him that he did that.
We've used this word miracles a lot this morning, Tony. Specifically, how do you define a miracle, the 50,000 you write about in your book?
All right, good question. Comes up a lot. Well, during the process, imagine 50 years is 18,000 days. So 18,000 days of talking to God and experiencing miracles, you get to know what they are, but a little difficult to explain it. So I always sensed after several miracles, I sensed that a miracle was something which God did. I recognized that God just did that thing. So if I perceive that God did it, then to me it's a miracle. It may be not a miracle to anybody else. Let me use a case in point. If a person has a splitting headache for 4 days, and it gets so bad it gets worse every hour, splitting headache never stops, after 4 days they're in a state of tears, and they take a minute, they take a deep breath, and they say, God, please help me with this terrible miracle. If it disappears in 1 second after they say that prayer, to that person, it's going to be a miracle. You can tell them all kinds of things, like, well, you just had more water this morning or whatever you'll tell them. But that's what a miracle is. Personally, if you think God did something for you or to you to help you, it's going to be a miracle. Now, I get that question so often in the last 50 years. I've been trying to evangelize people and talk about miracles, so I looked into what Webster calls it. And Webster says the same thing. It's something that is perceived to be an intervention by this higher power, a deity. He uses the word deity. So that's what a miracle is. Now, a lot of people will say to me, that's not a miracle. That's in a little while, I'm going to be sharing some miracles. I'm going to share some that people will say, oh, that's not a miracle. So you'll understand then what they are miracles to the person, and that's what really matters. Now, we left off a little while ago. We were talking about what does the book prove, and I just want to reinforce the book proves that God exists, that he loves us, that he made us to be his friends, not just, slaves, robots, servants, but friends, and that he does talk to us, and he does respond to us. He lets us ask him questions on a conversational basis. If you read the Bible, you notice that Moses was seen. They used to see Moses in the tent during the day, and they would see a figure of a man inside the tent. And they said, Moses is a famous guy. He speaks to God face to face. So they envisioned that he was talking to a man inside. They saw a figure of a man inside the tent. And so that's where we're headed. All of us are supposed to be having conversations with God, man to man, because he's always with us. We don't have to keep talking through other people. The key to everything, if you read my book and you try to find God in your life, the key to everything is to keep asking him questions. And he solves the problem of getting you the answer. For example, if you ask a question and you're not getting the answer, he has to figure that out. That's not your problem. That's his problem. You asked him a question, he loves you, and you're not understanding his answer. Well, he's God. He'll figure out a way to get the answer into you, whether it be a dream or somebody will call you on the phone. And when I share some miracles in a moment, you'll see how he does that. He constantly gets through to me, and I'm very thick-headed. I'm an accountant by trade. I have to have all the facts, everything. I don't accept a miracle till I've seen some very clear evidence, because that's the accounting phenomenon. My attitude is, prove it to me. So God had to prove to me that he was with me. So in that sense, the book is a good example of a condensation of a guy who said, no, I'm not easily going to accept. Actually, in the beginning, I thought I was schizophrenic because I was, getting inspiration. So I had to get through that state. Was this really happening? Is this really God talking to me? All right, so it proves those things, okay? You can talk to God. That's the most essential thing. If you're talking to God, asking him questions, you've solved the whole problem, because he then has the problem to respond to us. Now, I'm going to give an example to the audience, because I know I say a lot of things, but I've got to put some proof even right here. The book will prove everything, but let me say this to prove it to you. Evidence that you can talk to God, that it's built in. I mean, when God made us, He made us with the ability to communicate with him. It's part of it's like when you buy a car, it's one of the extras that you buy in a car is your radio or your air conditioner. Well, God put into us the ability to talk to him, so we'd always have that ability. And here's some examples of it. Now, most people, I've been doing this for 50 years, and it's hysterical what happens. Most people, if you ask them, they'll say yes. At the closet every morning. People go to the closet to get dressed. They stand at the closet and they say, should I wear that tie with that shirt? And I better not do that. How about those shoes with that? Oh, I better not do that. And should I wear this belt with that, et cetera, et cetera. Most people, when they're getting dressed, they're asking questions at the closet. So I bring this up because that'll help your listeners to think every morning when they go to the closet, they can think, what's going on inside of my mind? And here's what's happening. First, you don't know the answer. That's why you're asking yourself a question. You raise a question in your mind. Should I do this? That's an indication you didn't have the answer, or you would not be asking the question. So the fact that you're asking yourself a question is proof that you don't know the answer. Right after you ask the question, suddenly, from nowhere, you get an answer. Where did that come from? Why didn't you have the answer before you asked the question? And that's a little clue that you have the mind of God. The Bible talks about how we can be double-minded. We can think in our human terms, or we can think in our spiritual terms. So each of us has the risk, the danger of being double-minded, where we think God's talking to us, but it's really our own mind. So that's why we have to keep asking him. Now, you'll notice if you talk at the closet every morning, or when you go shopping, the same thing happens. When you're shopping, you're going up and down the aisle, you're asking yourself questions because you don't know. Should I buy the bigger size? Should I buy that one because it's discounted? You don't know the answer, but the answer comes to you immediately. So that's how people can begin in the embryonic stages of talking to God, is if you realize that information and wisdom is coming into you from an outside source constantly, that'll help you realize God's talking to you all the time. And that'll start revealing a lot of miracles. And I have another quick point to make. If you can think back, and most people can do this, I've been asking this question for 50 years too, most people can think back to the moment when you were in a crib and you couldn't speak with your mouth. You couldn't speak words. You can find episodes of that if you think back in your life. And so you have a picture of yourself in a crib, your diaper is wet, and you're screaming and hollering at the top of your voice because something inside of you has taught you and trained you that if you want to get your diaper changed, you scream and holler. Now, where did you get that wisdom from? You can't talk. Nobody can talk to you. You don't understand anything. But one thing you know very clearly, I'm going to scream because my diaper's wet. Same thing happens when you want milk or when you want to eat. So you see, there's a program inside of us, and it's really the voice of God. And I've been doing this for 50 years, so I'm telling you, I'm positive it's the voice of God that was in the crib telling me, you want to get your diaper changed, you better scream. And here's the proof. Because here's the proof. You could have done many things. You could have banged on the wall. You could have folded your arms and pouted. You could have closed your eyes and kept shaking your head left to right. You could have done a lot of things, but you didn't do that. You screamed and hollered. And somebody taught you to do that. Okay, so quick summary then is think about the crib event and think about at the closet or when you're shopping, you're asking questions, you're getting answers from someplace. Okay. So the book clearly explains that. Then it explains, as I said before, how to be careful to make sure you're not listening to the devil. That's an extremely important aspect of this process, and that's clearly explained. It shows 13 confirmations that God was writing this book. As I said earlier, he barged in on me, broke in on me 13 times, at least 13 times in the 14 months, and proved to me, and they're all documented in a schedule in the book. There's 100 miracles explained out of the 50,000 I've experienced. 100 of them were selected to be thoroughly written about. I'm getting rave reviews about that. I'm very happy to say. People tell me it kept them on the edge of their seat. They cried when they read some of them. They laughed when they read some of them, and it's very heartwarming to me. And I hasten to add, and I really am sincere, I'm positive God wrote this book, and I'm not surprised the miracles are touching because of that. And then, finally, after I had the book all done, gave it to the publisher, it was going on its way to the printer, I had 3 miracles happen that made me call the book back twice. I had to call the book back. I caught it in time to add things to the book because 2 miracles confirmed without any doubt that God wrote this book. And I'll let people find it as a surprise when they read it. There's very clearly explained why did I have to call it back twice from the printer before they started printing it. Okay, now I'm going to get into some miracles because now you can start to hear some real things that happened. Now, some miracles are flabbergasting, and I looked up the word. There is such a word, flabbergasting. And those are things like Moses, when he was delivering the plagues in Egypt, he delivered 10 plagues, but God sent the plagues. Moses just announced them. But those are flabbergasting miracles, 10 plagues that happened. When Moses parts the water, it's not really Moses, it's God parting the water. Flabbergasting, shocking. Now, I bring that up because after 50 years, I get a little tired when people say, that's not really a miracle. The small things, they say, no, that's not a miracle, like the headache example I gave you a minute ago. So I acknowledge there are small miracles and there are large miracles, so I'm going to give you a blend of both. For example, a very small miracle, I guess most people would say this is small. You get an inspiration one day. This is a true story, happened to me. I got a thought, gee, I haven't talked to my brother in 2 months. I better call him and say hello, see how he's doing. So I reach for the phone, and the phone rings before I grab it. I pick it up, and he says to me, my brother called me while I was going to call him, and he says, you know, it's been 2 months, and I thought I'd give you a call. Now, that may not be a miracle to anybody else, but to me, I was going to say that to him. I went to reach the phone rings, it's him, and he says it to me. So you see, that may be a small miracle, but indeed it's a miracle because if you're talking to God, the inspiration came from God.
In your travels, people have read this book, do you get people saying, yeah, I've had some of those miracles happen to me, too?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, and I do. I put my email address in the book so people can send comments. I've been getting wonderful ones that do just that, and I'm glad you brought that up just now because I'm about ready to explain a miracle that has to do with something pretty flabbergasting, I think. I think if your listeners have to leave us at all, they can Google the title. If they Google the title or go on Amazon for the title, they'll get a wealth of information in case they have to leave us. So I want to say one more time, if they Google the title is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. All right, so let me explain this pretty flabbergasting miracle. You know, when you read the Bible, most people know that in the book of Revelations, the last book, the Bible says that the devil's number is 666. And if you're a friend of God, as I've been trying to be for the last 50 years, early on you learn that he knows everything and we don't know everything. So we're always asking him questions. So one day I read this. I had read it many times, but when I read it one day, I got inspired to say, wait a minute. The only number I see in the Bible is 666. What about all the other numbers? 5s, the 4s, the 3s, the 2s? And golly, it seems like they must mean something. So I got inspired.
How about the 12 apostles? There's a number.
Yeah, famous number, a very important number, held as a holy number, by the way, 12. So I got inspired to do some research. I did. I spent a lot of time researching, and here's what I found out. Yes, indeed, the other numbers do have meanings. And in my book, there's an exhibit in the book that explains all the numbers and what they mean. Because of all the research I did, God inspired me to put it in there. But this miracle was that I did some research and I found out that 777 is the number that has been held for generations. Long before Jesus was born, the Jews held 777 in high regard as the holiest of numbers. And then I found a footnote in the Bible, an old Bible footnote that said exactly that. And let me tell you where it is. In the Book of Wisdom, chapter 7, coincidentally, chapter 7, we're talking about the number 7, it lists the attributes of wisdom. And in the Book of Wisdom, chapter 7, it lists 21 attributes of wisdom. And then there's a footnote that says 21 is like 777, which is the holiest of numbers. If you add the numbers up, 7 plus 7 plus 7, you get 21. And then it said that the Jews have held this number in great regard as the holiest of number for generations. So that made me do some more research about 777. And what I found out was that Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, Bethlehem, it is 777 meters above sea level. And after I found that out, I got inspired by God. It was interesting. You know, when God is your friend, he does talk to you like a real friend. So what he inspired me with was, well, now that you know Bethlehem is 777 meters above sea level, why don't you check out where Jesus died, Golgotha, Skull Hill. So I looked that up, and sure enough, Golgotha, Skull Hill is also 777 meters above sea level. So here we are. Let me make the point. God created the whole universe. He makes this small planet Earth. And when he makes the small planet Earth, long before Jesus was born, he decides to make Bethlehem and Golgotha, where the birthplace and death place of Christ, at 777 meters above sea level. I think that's pretty flabbergasting. The reason it's a miracle is because he got me from seeing 666 to investigate and find out this little known truth, really. I don't know anybody else who knew it until I brought it up, so I take it as a personal miracle. So, you know, key in this whole book and what it proves is we have to keep talking to God, asking questions, because he's our partner in life and he has all the wisdom. It would be kind of stupid of us to never ask him any question. All right, let me tell you the next miracle I want to share with people, and this is in the book too. It's called the New Heart Miracle. I was awakened one morning at 3 in the morning. I got inspired by God to get up, go downstairs to the kitchen, and write a letter to a man who was having heart surgery the next morning. He was a family relative. My wife was going to be visiting him, but I couldn't get there till later in the day. So I was inspired to, at 3 o'clock in the morning, go downstairs, write a letter to the man to say something to him, and then see him later that day. So I go down. First, I kind of argued with my best friend, God, thinking, why are you waking me up at 3 o'clock in the morning? I'll never get back to sleep, yada, yada, yada. So I laid in bed and kind of argued about it. He got me up. He convinced me. So I went downstairs. I sat at the table, and I said, okay, God, what am I going to write? And I got inspired. Well, why don't you write? When I tell you what he inspired me with, I hope you'll see that it was God and not me that came up with this. I said, what am I going to write about? And he said, well, why don't you write about what Psalm 51 says? Now, Psalm 51 starts out by saying, create in me a new heart, O God. And they've set it to music. There's a musical record you can buy called Psalm 51, and it sings that song. So I thought, well, that's great. Yeah, I'll write that, Psalm 51. So I started to write. I was going to write, I'm praying that God will create a new heart for you during the heart surgery. And just before I got that written, I heard the record player go on in the room next to me. I was in the kitchen. The living room was next to me. The record player went on. I heard the turntable spinning. I heard the arm move over. The needle landed on the record. And the record that was on there was Psalm 51. And the first words that came out of the record was, create in me a new heart, O God. Gave me goosebumps the size of golf balls at 3 o'clock in the morning, all alone. I thought, I've got to get up and see who's fooling around. You know, who's playing a practical joke on me, put the record player on. And so as I got up to do that, I got inspired again. God inspired me with the question, how would anybody know that you were thinking of writing that letter and put the record on other than me? So you're looking for some conspirator to put the record on, but it was me. Well, I had 3 children, and a couple of them were practical jokers, so I was suspicious. I checked everybody was sleeping, and that is a flabbergasting miracle. Now, maybe to nobody else but me, but just like the 3 6s and the 3 7s, to me they are flabbergasting miracles.
Tony, your book is called Tony's 50,000 Co-Incidence Miracles. How do you tell the difference to know if one of them is a miracle from God or if it's just a coincidence?
Great. That's a perfect question. I never even thought of it. I should have brought it up.
Sounds like a chapter in your next book.
Yeah, that's right. Really, I'm learning a lot from the questions I'm getting on the first book. Well, here's how you know it's a miracle. As I always tell people, you want to become a friend of God. That's the prime goal. I don't care what religion you want to belong to. God will straighten that out. I don't know what books you want to read, who do you want to talk to. That's all secondary. First thing is, like Adam and Eve, like Noah, like Moses, like Abraham, their quest was become a friend of God. That was their first prime quest. So that's our quest. Now, here's how you know it's a miracle, because I've been doing this for 50 years. I guess after the first 3 years I learned I have to keep asking God questions. That's the key. If I ask God a question and He inspires me to do something and something fantastic happens, that's how I know it's a miracle. I ask God what to do. Like, for example, on the 3-6 story I just cited, He inspired me to go do the research on the 3 6s, find the other numbers. I found the other numbers. He leads me to look into 777, and then He teaches me that Jesus is born at 777 and He dies at 777. That's a miracle because I was asking Him what to do every step of the way. Likewise with the record that I just talked about. I said, what should I write about? He inspires me, why don't you write about that record, Psalm 51, and bingo, the record, Psalm 51, starts to play at 3 o'clock in the morning. By the way, if I didn't get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, the question is, would the record have played anyway? It's a mystery. So if you don't get up when He says to get up, maybe you don't hear the record. So the key to knowing you're experiencing miracles, again, is asking God questions and getting those inspirations, those ideas that come to you right after the question. And by the way, I should stress, when you ask God a question, the answer comes immediately. The Bible is very clear about that. If you read about people who ask God questions, He doesn't say, come back in a couple of days, I got to check with my advisors, I got to check with my lawyers. He doesn't do that. He has all of the answers. Matter of fact, He puts the desire in you to ask the question that He's trying to teach you something. Right?
Tony, is there a style or a format you use when you ask God a question? Can you do it when you're driving down the street? Do you stop and get down on one knee? I mean, does it matter the way of what you're doing when you ask the question?
The answer is no, but if you're starting out, when I first began, I would, get to a quiet place, kneel down, keep everything quiet, make sure I'm hearing God. Yeah, in the early stages, but when you're a close friend of God and you're talking to Him about everything, you'd have to stop. You'd have to go to this quiet place constantly all day long. I was look a little
funny at the supermarket, getting down and kneeling down in front of the Cheerios.
Right, exactly right. And I was a president of 4 companies. The businesses were in trouble. You're in a meeting. You have to decide to do something, and you have to make a decision. So if you're a friend of God, you make the decisions by constantly using the mind of Christ, the mind of God that we have, because we have the ability. We're double-minded. We can think spiritually, or we can think in human terms. So we need to keep drifting over into the spiritual realm and think with God. Look at things with God's eyes, think with God's mind, and that's how you'll know they're miracles. A very good question. You take 24 hours and do that. Ask God everything you want to do for 24 hours, and you'll start seeing miracles because, indeed, He's there, and He does answer you. That's the dilemma. People say, what's wrong with the world? What's wrong with people? That's the answer. What's wrong with the world, people, is we don't ask God what to do.
What was your goal or purpose of writing this book?
Well, I guess in essence the summary is because God kept impressing upon me that, I know this is going to sound weird, but He impressed upon me that I was in fact an expert. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but he kind of made it clear to me by a lot of inspirations. He spent 50 years giving me miracles, and he said to me one day, did I give you all these miracles, 50,000 miracles to take to the grave? Is that what I did? You think I gave you 3 miracles a day for 50 years so you could just take all that to the grave? And that's why He got me writing the book, okay? To leave something behind. And as I tell everybody, it's a condensation. This is not a book like every other book. This is the reason. If you go to a library and you take all the books on religion and say to yourself, let me make a summary, let me make a condensation of it. All these books are telling me, like there's 1,000 books that tell you how to talk to God. There's 1,000 books that tell you how to talk to God. There's 1,000 books that will tell you how to pray. So, do we need to read 1,000 books? So if you get a condensation, so that's what this book became. It's a condensation of how to talk to God, how to prove that He's present and that He loves you and He's your friend. And so if you can talk to God about everything, you really have the essence of everything you'll ever need. You want to buy a car, you ask Him what car to buy. You want to get married, you ask Him which person to marry. I mean, if you have God at your side, you have everything you need to have. And so there's the real essence of why the book is being written, is to help people do that.
Do you have a second book coming out? Do you have to wait for 50,000 more coincidence miracles before you write another book?
No, I only have 100 in this book. My publisher said, Tony, we can't put out a book with 50 so we won't have enough paper. I said, I'm only going to pick 100 of them. Yeah, so we have a few books still we could write. I'll tell you, this next miracle will be in the second or third book. We'll have an extension of this because this happened a few times. But I had a business client I worked with for 3 years. And one Monday morning, I had to go in and give a presentation. They were wrapped. And when I got to his office, normally his office, very pristine, president's office, everything well kept. But this Monday morning, he had like 50, that's one more than 49, boxes all over his office, paper strewn all over the place. And his employees told me that on Friday, this was Monday morning, but on Friday, his lawyer called and said he was being sued a huge amount of money. And he had to find the original contract. So he spent, the president, all weekend into the warehouse getting the boxes, going through, trying to find the original contract in order to ward off this major suit. So when I got there, he was still scrambling, trying to find the documents. And I got very compassionate. Most of us, when we have a friend, seeing them having tribulations, we share their passion, their pain. And so I started praying in my mind, like, what could I do to help him? How can I help? Why is he going through this? He's a dear friend of mine, and I got inspired. And my inspiration was, Tony, next to your left foot. That was the message. So you ask God everything He tells you. Look at the box next to your left foot. I just walked into the building. So I looked down at the box next to my left foot. About 20 folders in a box. One of them was bright yellow. All the other ones were manila, tan color. One of them was yellow. I got inspired. Take the yellow folder. I took the yellow folder out of the box, I opened it, and right on top of the folder was the contract he was looking for. Now, that's a coincidence miracle, right? I'm standing next to the box, one of 50 boxes. I get inspired to look down and take the folder out. Amazing. Even to me, it gives me goosebumps. But
that's one of Tony's 50,000 coincidence miracles, and you can get more information by visiting the website, which we link to on our website. Go to the Morning Show guest page at WILI.com/AM. Tony, hope you have 50,000 more coincidence miracles. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Thank you.